smarter things than that. I really have done some smarter things than come off at 60 miles an hour onto a slip road that's still mostly covered in snow. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of How to Drive. Now, this first episode is kind of late because, well, what we're talking about has been and gone, at least so far. If you believe the British weather, then we could have it again tomorrow or next week or just about any time. And no, I'm not talking about rain. We're going to be talking about how to drive in the snow. Now, how to drive in the snow, to be honest, it begins even before you've got onto the road. You need to make sure that the car is clear of snow. It needs to make sure it's clear of ice. You can't just gouge out a little hole on your windscreen and that'll be suitable. That's not the case at all. But part of the issue with winter driving sometimes is simply getting the car ready to go places, which can take time. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask, and it never ends very well when I try to do this sort of thing. But sometimes it takes an absolute age. Currently there is a lot of debate around whether you should even let the car warm up in the morning when it's cold, which I can see the logic of you shouldn't, but at the same time, an engine's a bit like a human body. If it's not warmed up properly, if you think about an engine that's going to do exercise when you're driving, it needs to be warmed up a bit. And I know, particularly in the Baleno, the car doesn't like harsh and choppy gear changes if the car is not warm, or the engine's not warm. It's a bit like if you went to go do a 100-metre sprint without warming up first and stretching off. You can do it, but over time it's going to hurt and do a lot of damage. Appreciate what people are probably saying about sitting there with the blowers on for ages, but then again, the car's got you've got to get rid of the mist off your windscreen. You can't move if it's still there. It is very early in the morning of the 8th of February. I have just gotten in from taking Sarah to work to start her day shift. I have to go to work myself later. Now, there's a weird blue hue going on, and you can probably work out why. It snowed. I've just gotten in from taking Sarah to work, and we deliberately went out early to get the car cleared. As you can see, that's been out. There's not, even though it's a white car, you can't really see hardly any snow on it. What's on there is just what couldn't come off when we were tidying up, trying to get out, and also just what's probably landed on it as I've been driving. The number of people I've seen out and about this morning where they haven't cleared the roof of their car, where they've left the side windows all covered. You're not supposed to do that. You are supposed to have your car as free of snow as you can. The main offender I saw today were Range Rovers and big 4x4s, and look at my artwork trying to get in and out of the garden today, house today. Main offenders what I saw were big 4x4s, where people just don't clean the roof off them. Then people skipping along in 4x4s like there's no change in the weather. Or should I say 4x4s, things like Peugeot 5008s that aren't really rated for going off-road. It's really weird. It's quite annoying. When it's at these sort of conditions, you've got to be careful how much you rev your engine. You've got to be careful how much you rev. You've got to watch what gear, and you need to have the. I would normally bomb along, listen to a bit of Queen, have the stereo off, because just because it's snow and snow on the surface, you don't know what's under the snow. It could be super black ice. It could be lots of car parts from accidents. You just don't know. And got to watch what gearing. You need to leave a bigger gap. As it was, leaving the hospital in West Suffolk, anyone who's been there, the hospital's on a hill, so you got to go up a hill to get in, which means the lower gear and watch your revs and watch your wheels spin, and then you've got to get back out, which is obviously coming down the hill. And at the bottom of the hill, I slid a tiny bit because it's a first gear hill, 10 mile an hour. So obviously I had no engine braking ability. It was just on the brakes. Make sure it's locked. Now it only took us about 10-15 minutes to clear that. My hands are bloody freezing, but the car can be getting nice and warm. You put your rear heater on, you put your demister on, and crack on whilst you get the snow off. Just buy a soft brush off Amazon. £2 or £3 I would have thought for a soft brush. Soft broom even. Or broom handle and tie a brush from a dustpan and brush onto it. It's indicative of the standard of British driving sometimes. And dual carriageway, I don't know how audible it is on this. I might have to bump the audio header so you can hear it. Dual carriageway are basically across that 2 or 3 fields that way. Understandably, because people haven't driven on it overnight. One of the lanes has got a lot of slush and snow in it, because it's where the snow just gets chucked when the car's driven through it, as it's dispersed it. People trying to bomb through that outside lane that's still full of snow and slush and sludge, like nothing's happened. And, you know, why? And then people trying to push onto the dual carriageways, like even though you're not meant to push on from the side road, from the slip road, people have been. Now, back on the point I was saying about clearing the snow off. You've probably, as a child, you've probably been hit either by a sibling or in a school snowball fight or something like that. You've probably been hit by someone with a snowball who has got a good throw, got a good arm. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not sure people I know would be so happy about having a snowball thrown at them. Now, I don't know how fast some of my friends could throw. A couple of them that made it to the cricket team, so they've got to be fairly fast at bowling to do that. But obviously when you've got a car going 40, 50, 60 miles an hour, if you can get up to those sort of speeds. This is just talking about the snow coming off the back. It's a shame I can't turn this camera around part way through. But you've got that. You've got people who can make it on the cricket team, etc. But do you really think that people want to have their cars hit like that? I don't particularly want to have my car hit with snow at that sort of speed, just coming off the back. Never mind if you haven't cleared forwards and you've got to brake, and all the snow you haven't cleared off here comes down here, and then you can't see. And then you're reliant on your wipers, which might or might not still be frozen, to then clear a view. And in those seconds that you can't see, what could happen? Just about anything, including someone having snow fly at you. I know we don't get snow an awful lot in the UK, but it's still, you still got to be careful. Got to be careful. Anyway, I need to get my brakey fast, because I've also got to get myself to work at some point shortly, and I'm not looking forward to that. I've already been out in this once. Gotta go out in it again on all this snow. Get it off the roof. Off the roof, even this thin layer is enough to cause a problem. This device I'm using I got from Aldi about 3 years ago. Cost me $2.99. It's a combination of a squeegee and a brush. So if your local Aldi has one in at some point, I strongly recommend you get one. When you have cleared your car and finally get on the road, remember your stopping distance needs to be at least 10 times more than what it would be normally. Because when there's snow on the ground, you don't actually know what is under the snow. That could be black ice under there, that could have been nothing and just snow that's settled. If you've got the luxury of doing so, try and find the freshest snow if you're able to do so, get a bit more grip. You need to listen a lot more than you do normally when you're driving. And I don't just mean for engine sounds and things like that. You need to listen for where the grip is. If you can hear your car slipping and sliding, you need to be able to listen for someone else who might be coming down the road out of control if you're busy doing your observations or extra observations or fighting your car to keep it in a straight line. Although if you're fighting to keep it in a straight line, then really you shouldn't be out and about because it's too dangerous. People will give you varying pieces of advice. Some people will say set off in first gear, but just be very, very gentle. Some people say set off in second gear to keep your RPMs low and avoid wheel spin. I would personally say just do whatever you can to minimize wheel spin, because personally I've found great success so far when I'm trying to get away of just letting my clutch do a lot of the work. Granted, it might not be the most friendly thing to be doing to the clutch, but with where the turbo kicks in on my Booster Jets engine, sometimes it kicks in a weird place in the torque band. So, for instance, if you've accidentally got some wheel spin at about 2,500 RPM, 3,000 RPM, that's right when my turbo sort of kicks into maximum power, which then in turn makes a wheel spin even worse. You do need to be prepared to do things in higher gears than you would do normally. And you need to be, if you've got a manual car, you need to be checking your clutches and covering your clutch a lot more, because you might get your gear change wrong, might need to suddenly dip it to avoid the car stalling. Lady I was working with before I got transferred to my new location, she said, I'll be all right. I've got a W on my gearbox. I just press that and I'll be fine for driving in the snow. No, you won't be. Much like any snow feature or special feature you have on your car, it's all very well pressing whatever button to do it, but you've still got to be driving properly. You could have all the winter things you could think of. Winter tires. You could have studded tires if they were permitted. Of course, not actually permitted on UK roads, but you could have studded tires. You could have snow tires. You could have all the variable differentials or locking differentials, all the gentlest and most linear of power delivery. But if you can't drive correctly in the snow, there's no point in having any of it. Unfortunately, what makes a lot of driving worse in the snow, mind you, that said, this year I don't think it'll have been this bad because of COVID and people working from home. But usually most employers, or at least in my experience, employers tend to put it against you or hold it against you if you can't get in because of the weather. It's a bit like the old illness thing when you call up with a call, I'm sorry, I can't get it, so blocked up. And then when you come back in, they'll do the whole, you're sick, but if you're sick again, we're going to hold this against you. But this year, it's not quite been so bad. The trade-off is, because there hasn't been as much traffic around this year, it made it so the grit was not being driven into the surface, or the salt, or whatever you want to call it. When they were salting and gritting the roads, there was not the volume of traffic around to bed it into the surface of the road. It led to having to be extra careful. where Sarah and I live now, our house is on a hill. The driveway's on a hill. So that was fun trying to get the car up there one day. And then I've got two choices when it comes up. I can either drive the car around forwards and then do a 3-point turn on a very small piece of concrete, or I reverse the car around, which is still a little bit uphill to reverse it. Surprisingly, reversing it round back into its position was easier than thought, but it was not the easiest of things to do. This year, in driving in the snow, there was a video went out on the Velocity Kinetics page a few weeks ago now, where I had a near miss, where someone just randomly veered. Now, as much as I would have loved to gone to the police about that driving, as in just submitted the dash cam footage, I don't know whether he's hit a patch of black ice and was in the process of trying to fix it. Some of that could be because people aren't used to driving in the snow, particularly in the UK. Some of it might just be people having lapses in concentration. Ultimately, what a lot of people suffer from when driving in the snow, particularly in the UK, is the same thing that a lot of people suffer from in the UK when it comes to driving in the snow. Well, actually, to be honest, a lot of drivers in the UK suffer from this in the first place, especially if you watch various dashcam channel footage. People have no patience. None at all. When you're trying to drive how you should drive in the snow, people are right up your trumpet. They're not giving you the space. It really becomes quite a problem when you're trying to drive along. People often just floor it like nothing's happened. When I was driving to work, when the snow happened, my route to work involves going down the A14. I don't think I broke 60 miles an hour. Even though it was clear, I didn't break 60 miles an hour. Other people in the outside lane bombing along at 70. So I've been able to get to work, and because of the snow I've been able to come home early, so it's a nice afternoon. But what I'm going to play next is a dashcam video from my drive today, maybe even this morning's commute with Sarah if the camera saved it. But on the way back from my work, bloody hell, people not paying attention, people putting their foot down when they shouldn't be. Well, as you'll see, a moment where I feel like my life flashed before my eyes very briefly. Oh dear. It's been cleaner, far cleaner. So what am I doing now, rather than sitting inside in the warm? Because of how filthy the roads are, I'm having to refill the screen wash. And as you can tell, if that's how filthy the front end has gotten. Let's have a look to see how bad the back is. Surprisingly okay. Not brilliant, but surprisingly okay. But it's insane just how dirty sludge is, because it's all the dirt off the road and dirt coming off people's cars. Now I know you shouldn't. A lot of people would say that you shouldn't do what I'm about to do as soon as I am after finishing a drive. But you know what? After seeing my life flash before my eyes today, I could do with a little bit of distraction. That said, I did also do a good deed. Jo, co-worker, she couldn't get a car out the road, which is fair because the road to where we work is to our car park, should I say, because we're in the middle of a town square. But our car park is off a cobbled road, and that doesn't see any grit, so it was just like sheet ice. Probably could have done a bit more finesse on the clutch on her part, but had to push her car out. Me and another local of Stowmarket managed to get her car out, so that's all well and good. This looks like a urine sample, doesn't it? So yeah, about to play the video from now. We'll discuss what's going on in a minute. done some smarter things than that. Really have done some smarter things than come off at 60 miles an hour onto a slip road that's still mostly covered in snow. Ice is also a killer in this in the snow because of black ice, which is where the road is frozen and you can't see what it is. It's more than likely going to be black ice. Never mind ice on your own car trying to get ready to go to work in the morning or just in general go out. In the snow or just indeed freezing weather, I would always recommend, if you're able to afford to do this, is to try and keep the tank as full as you're able to do so, as in your fuel tank. The reason being is aiding in de-icing, because the car gets warmed up, ready to get rid of the stuff off the windscreen, front and back. Also, when you if you do scrape the ice off or use the icer, it then means that the windows are all steamed up. So you've still got to turn it on and use your blowers anyway, so 2 birds, 1 stone. But if you have to do that, at least do that twice in a day, and there was one day it was a Sunday, Sarah and I were going out to do our food shop. It took 20 minutes to get the ice off my car because of where the car is. We think it had rained overnight. It rained, frozen, started to defrost, and then froze again. So that took forever to get the ice off, even with the icer. And the car must have been running at least 15 minutes before that. And when you're doing that, when you've got your heated wing mirrors on, heated rear windscreen, if you've got the luxury of a heated front windscreen, then if you're running that, or if you're just running your blowers with or without your air conditioning, I found better success using the air conditioning to get it to clear faster, and seems to stay clearer for longer. But that was this winter. Maybe next winter it'll be a different story. But you need to try and keep the tank as full as you can to allow for things like, if you have to do that twice a day, suddenly you've used half an hour, your car's been running half an hour, and you've gone nowhere, and that's quite a chunk of fuel used. Then if you're having to do that, say for instance, if that's at the start of your day and the end of your work day, 5 days a week, suddenly half an hour a day, 2.5 hours of your week will have been spent de-icing a car, and 2.5 hours of fuel will have just been burnt. Not that that's necessarily an overly bad thing, but it happens. I would also recommend making sure you've got some good screen wash, because you'll use a lot in this weather. Now you could do what my dad does. What he does is he doesn't buy the pre-mixed screen wash. He buys the stuff that you dilute. But what he does is in the winter he tends to put it in virtually neat, and so he's using nearly just, I can't think what the concentration is off the top of my head. Suffice it to say, he's got, in some of the cars he's had where it can take like 5-6 litres, he's had 5 or 6 litres of virtually neat screen wash. But then in the summer he then just keeps diluting it down. If you use that, then obviously your stuff will work to a much colder temperature. That said, if you're equipping it so it can run to -20, whilst I have no doubts parts of the UK were well on the way to that temperature this winter, it still not something we've had for a very long time. I wouldn't go cheap on your screen wash, because the cheaper it is, the less cold it'll work too. I used to get my screen wash from Aldi and Lidl, because I could get 5 litres for £1.99. On one occasion, they probably a pricing mismatch on their system. I got it for 99p. So I think I picked up 3 or 4. So I'd had 20 litres of screen wash for £4. That did come around to bite me on the arse later, though. The reason being, not because they suddenly went, excuse me, we sold you this and it should have been another £4 on top of that. You should have paid £8. Nothing like that at all. The stuff that I got from Aldi and Lidl, and in turn the cheap stuff from places like Tesco and Halfords and wherever else you can think of, typically only works to -5. Where it bit me on the arse is when we moved to South Shields, which is a little bit further north than where we were in Middlesbrough, but it was a bit colder. And we also had that horrible Beast from the East weather, or at least that horrible winter leading up to Beast from the East, right before I had my stress mental breakdown. And what happened one morning, what really contributed to it badly one day, it might have even been the same week that I just cracked. Certainly, if it wasn't the week I cracked, it was the week before. Because it only worked to -5, it'd been -7 or 8 overnight. So the jets weren't working on the car, they'd frozen over. And then what was coming out was so low pressure, because a lot of it was probably frozen, or at least something in the system was clogged. Even running the car as hot as I could on the thermostat, that was not fixing the problem. So then it meant when I got halfway to work, my windscreen was completely toast. I could not see a damn thing. I had to pull off into a slip road on the A19. Now, those people who've driven up the A19 between Middlesbrough and Newcastle, sometimes that road is a little bit of a death trap. And some of the lay-bys on that road, particularly one where I had to stop, are not very well designed. You haven't got an awful lot of space to pull up in, and if you've managed to pull up in it, sometimes you haven't got a lot of space to then kick back out and get up to speed. I had to get out and use some of my lunchtime drink and de-ice and make my own sort of screen wash concoction, and had to use that to clean the front and rear windows, because it was just, you just can't see. In this weather, it is amazing how filthy your car gets. But that's why you don't use the cheap stuff. The -5 stuff's okay for the summer. Why not? Because you shouldn't be getting to -5 in the summer. All British weather jokes aside, it should not get to -5. I've recently taken to using stuff I've got from Screwfix, which can go to -10. Now, the Screwfix stuff I've had two. I've had Screwfixes, I can't think what their value range is. It's basically in their value range, which I think could go to -10 if I remember rightly. And that was pretty good. Not the greatest, but it was pretty good. I've also had some stuff. Well, you probably saw it in the video a little while ago when I was doing the checking the lights. It's in yellow yellow fluid. Urine jokes aside, Preston, which works to -10. I have not had the same problem with the car's washer jet system freezing over. So if I'm going to buy premix, I'm going to make sure it goes to -10. Something else you have to account for in this weather, just in general in winter, whether it's snow, whether it's wet, the roads are far filthier in the UK in winter. Particularly where we live, there's a lot of sugar beet farming going on. So the roads are just muddy with vehicles getting on and off fields all day and night, trying to get the stuff harvested. But just in general, the roads are filthy. Now, some might say, well, it's my fault for buying a white car, which, you know, maybe this is one of the occasions I should have splashed out and bought a black or a blue one. But £500 for black paint versus £0 for white. Small price to pay, I think. You don't need to be out there every weekend or every day washing your car unless you want to be. But I would always recommend making sure your number plate is visible, and not just visible as in, well, even though it's a bit dirty, I can still read it. No. Not just that, because sometimes you might have to do this 2 or 3 times a week. It needs to be visible, but it needs to be clean so it reflects. That is what it needs to be, and the same on the front. I'd also recommend, if you've got, particularly, I remember this happening quite a bit on my parents' Volvo estates, and not so much on one of my dad's second V70, because it had a little spoiler which stopped so much of the dirt getting on the back, but it still wasn't ideal. If you've got a vehicle with a large flat back like a Land Rover Discovery, maybe even a Subaru XV, older Volvo estates, you'll probably have to go then and clean the back end of the car a few times. You need to make sure your lights are visible and clean. You need to make sure you can see out of your windows. What I tend to do myself over winter, not for me, a little bit of it is vanity on the car, I'm not going to lie, but a lot of it is just to make my life easier later on, is if we get some good weather during the winter, on a day we have some good weather, I'll run around the bottom of the car, so below the windows, unless it really needs doing, I just knock off the dirt. It's not to get the car perfectly clean or anything like that, it's just to make it not so bad. I would also recommend, if you've got a car that has a reversing camera, to make sure that is clean, even if it's just licking your finger and cleaning it that way, because I've had to do that so many times because of where my reversing camera is. It seems to be right where the trailing edge cuts off and all the dirt sort of comes up. It's not quite got the right shape on it to keep it aerodynamically clean. And when you suddenly can't use that, for instance, for reversing, like I have to, up the side of the house, or reversing into a car parking space, suddenly you realise how much you rely on that. Even if, and this is where it comes back around to make sure your mirrors are clean. If your camera's not working, you've then got to go back to properly doing it with completely aidless. And if the mirrors aren't clean, that's not going to work for you either, assuming you haven't got the luxury of someone to guide you in and out of the space. I would also make sure your wipers are clean in this weather. The reason why I would say the wipers is they accrue a huge amount of dirt. Anyone who's washed the car and cleaned along them with the sponge will see the horrible black marks that are left behind on your sponge, especially when it's a clean sponge. I don't know why, that seems to suck so much more than if the car's just filthy. But anyway, you need to make sure they are clean, because otherwise they're just dragging more dirt across and not actually cleaning anything. It's bizarrely, all this winter driving, it requires a huge amount of preparation. A lot of it is not even just the driving side of things. But then again, that's a lot of driving, isn't it? It's not necessarily driving. It's the preparation.